Since we've seen the diplomatic breakthrough in the war between the United States and Iran that an agreement has been reached, as we heard from the president, many leaders will be there, I'm sure, applauding that agreement. President Trump has just arrived at the G7 summit site in France, which is a Hotel Royal in Eva. Of course, these moments are just video from the last few moments. Of course, that's anticipated over the weekend, but it's not a deal yet. Although it's not a deal yet, Vice President J.D. Vance has stated in recent moments that the objective is to announce the precise wording of the agreement with Iran sometime in the upcoming days. It's not signed. Furthermore, there are still a lot of unanswered issues regarding the specifics of this arrangement. As you look at these real-time photos from Evian in France, President Trump is obviously there for the G7, and the focus will be on Iran as well as Ukraine, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, lifting the U.S. embargo on Iranian ports, and providing a framework for further talks are all possible outcomes of this arrangement. The specifics are ambiguous. As I mentioned before, no text has been made public, although J.D. Vance says it might be in the next few days. Additionally, we are already witnessing what may be substantial differences between Iran, Israel, and the United States. Allow me to explain what Iran is saying. They claim that the negotiations would depend on the U.S. fulfilling a number of obligations, including the release of billions of dollars worth of Iranian funds that have been frozen, something that Washington is known to oppose. Following Trump's announcement that there would be no tolls, Iran likewise claims it will collect payments for ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Lebanon is the other component of that. Iran claims that an end to the conflict there must be part of the proposal. However, Israel claims it would not leave southern Lebanon. Melissa Bell, our senior international correspondent, is in Eva, France, where the G7 conference is taking place. Naturally, this is the location where we witness President Trump arrive. As you can see, our Jeremy Diamonds are located in Tel Aviv. I would like to start with Melissa. Melissa then gives us an idea of how much of this framework is at the forefront. I am aware that a few leaders have already made comments regarding this. Naturally, there were some of them who opposed this war in Iran. How is this going to be received? How are many of the leaders there responding to it? There's a lot of hope, much more than there used to be. But there's also a lot of caution in the way that hope is expressed. Naturally, keep in mind that none of the other G7 leaders who will meet with President Trump have seen any of this text. With all the possibilities for this to go awry, it's truly unclear what's in there or how we'll make it to Friday without any significant problems arising. However, G7 leaders recall that over the past few months, particularly with regard to this topic, they have had a tense relationship with President Trump's counterparts in this group. The fact that he has this digitally signed memorandum of understanding in his pocket at least, and is happy that he is able to do so given the tensions he has experienced regarding the lack of cooperation from G7 and European leaders on this issue, could help this G7 proceed more smoothly than the previous one. And you'll recall that he had abruptly left a G7 in Canada. The French government is making every effort to keep President Trump in office this time. Iran was always going to be at the center of these discussions. The leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates were scheduled to attend those talks tomorrow. Even so, the most recent discovery is going to play a lot bigger role in these conversations than it did before. Issa, you've heard from European leaders that they're willing to intervene and play a bigger role in these peace talks. Kajakhali's, the senior diplomats in the EU, have been telling us that. Additionally, the French presidency has informed us about the military resources involved in the worldwide but Franco-British endeavor to maintain open shipping on the Strait of Hormuz when hostilities have concluded. According to President MH, those military resources are in place. All that remains now is for the fighting to stop. There is growing hope that this could mark the start of a broader breakthrough. For the other G7 nations, there is also a strong desire to see the conflict end, largely because of the economic strain it has created. Joining us from Geneva, where Air Force One landed a short while ago, is c.n.n. correspondent Elena Trene. Elena, President Trump recently posted that ships have started moving through the Strait of Hormuz again. What more are you hearing? That's right. The president is eager to highlight what he views as a major agreement between the United States and Iran, especially as he prepares to meet several European leaders, many of whom he has openly criticized over the conflict. Trump has argued that European nations failed to adequately support U.S. efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We quote, "We're currently seeing images of the president arriving in evian-les-bains, France, stepping out of his motorcade and greeting officials. Returning to the agreement itself, there are still many unanswered questions. Like many others, I've been speaking with sources to better understand what the deal actually contains. The full text has not yet been released, although Vice President J.D. Vance said earlier today that he hopes it will be made public this week. What we do know is that dismantling Iran's nuclear program appears to be one of the central components of the agreement. U.S. officials also say the deal includes provisions allowing the United States to access, remove, and destroy Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium on site. Another major issue concerns the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and the timeline for doing so. President Trump stated yesterday that the waterway would reopen following Friday's signing ceremony in Geneva. However, Vance suggested in an interview with CNBC that whether the strait remains toll-free will be determined through future negotiations. Our expectation is that the Strait of Hormuz will remain open and toll-free over the long term, Vance said. That's one of the issues we'll address during the technical negotiations. There are many important details that still need to be worked out, and both sides will sit down to determine the best path forward. As you can hear, Vance's comments were more cautious than the president's earlier assertions that there would be no tolls whatsoever. According to Vance, the issue will be addressed during a 60-day implementation period, when negotiators will focus on technical details, including the removal and destruction of Iran's uranium stockpile, and the creation of enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance. From conversations with administration officials, it's clear that President Trump wanted to arrive at the G7 summit with what the White House views as a significant foreign policy achievement. Officials are expected to present the agreement as a major step toward ending the conflict with Iran. Still, many questions remain. There is uncertainty about the timeline for implementation and disagreements over financial compensation. Iranian officials have argued that frozen funds must be released before the 60-day talks can move forward. But the United States has said it will not provide any financial relief until Iran starts complying with the main provisions of the deal. So while the announcement represents progress, many critical details remain unresolved. As President Trump prepares for a bilateral meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, reporters will be looking for further clarification on these issues. For now, all eyes remain on France as the president begins his G7 meetings.